You're responsible.
Yeah, whatever I say is your fault.
Oh, no.
Strange Ride is brought to you commercial-free through the generous support of our patrons. Visit strangerideshow.com and click on Donate to help keep the history of the weird on the digital airwaves. I was standing in a nearby Wawa, that is to say a chain of convenience stores and gas stations that dot the northeast and mid-Atlantic region of the U.S. for those of you who don't happen to have ever had the pleasure of being inside a Wawa. Anyway, I was in the Wawa trying to make sense of their touchscreen breakfast sandwiches. For my sister and brother-in-law, I myself would never order a sandwich from anything you can get through a touchscreen, when I heard the familiar strain of voices in harmony, isolated from any instruments, singing a now ubiquitous line of 80s pop rock. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. In 2011, Rolling Stone called this the worst song of the 1980s. Blender and GQ labeled it the worst song of all time. And yet, nearly 40 years after that song had been recorded, here I was, listening to the bright, strangely naive ascending progression of synthesized notes answering Grace Slick and Mickey Thomas over the intercom of a regional chain on their corporate radio station. A lot of pop music finds its way onto corporate radio, even rock music. A careful selection of Cure songs, for example, was in regular rotation at the Cold Stone I managed after college, nestled among the brighter and bouncier offerings of the mid-'80s. Being on a corporate radio mix doesn't mean anything in particular, but it lends a kind of layered irony, or maybe Schadenfreude, to Starship's We Built This City. Someone always playing corporation games. Who cares? They're always changing corporation names. We Built This City is a song that was self-consciously recorded to garner the highest possible revenue for the band, and also the record company who created it, and it succeeded in spades. But weirdly, or perhaps strategically, City is also a song that spends most of its lyrics ranting against corporate culture. What I'm trying to say is, the highly commercial, chart-topping hit for a group with its roots in late 1960s counterculture may be the most complex and bizarre pop song of the 80s, if not the history of all pop music. Starship, or rather the band it grew out of, did in many ways build this city on rock and roll, but most of the people responsible for the building of said city had left or been kicked out of the band by the time they made that claim. In fact, it may be that the very removal of those artists actually allowed Starship to chart their first #1 single since the core of the band was formed in 1965. Today we're going to take a journey, a strange ride, into the dark, twisting, and haunted history of a song we now hear almost exclusively at the Wawa, unless we have the good sense to put it in our regular rotation in our 80s music queue, or the bad sense to program easy listening adult contemporary office rock into our car stereo. Today, we're going to find out exactly how and why Starship built this city. Yes, my name is Dr. Rob C. Thompson, generally your co-host and not your host, but I have taken over yet another episode of Strange Ride. In fact, this is probably going to be 2 episodes, for a topic about which I am deeply passionate. And to monitor me and make sure I don't foam at the mouth, we have, of course, your usual host, Savannah Verrett.
This is weird to be on the other side, because normally I'm the only one like foaming at the mouth excited about something, so this is nice. But when Rob made this, I thought that meant that he was now an expert of like all things music, so I asked him today, what does You Can Call Me Al by Paul Simon mean? And he told me, I don't know.
I think it's meaningless. Do you know what you can call me, what is it? If you be my bodyguard.
I can be your long lost pal.
What does that mean?
I can bullshit something if you give me like 30 minutes.
But why can you call me Betty? And why can I call you Al?
So if anyone can tell me the meaning behind the song, I will be your long lost pal. And I'll call you Betty and you can call me Al.
See, Savannah's already got us thinking about the wrong tune. Mims, get us back on track.
I built my entire personality on rock and roll. I don't see how somebody could not try to build a city on it.
This is Andrew Mims, of course, our music expert, I suppose. Savannah, is that fair?
Yeah.
Our rock expert.
Certainly knows more than I do.
Yes.
So.
I only
play
the
guitar
Alchemical
adequately,
Actors.
so
yes. We have guitar players, but you may be the only alchemical actor to have actually been in a band.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So we got some experts on staff
Well,
here.
no, Luke's played in a band.
Oh, has he really?
Yeah, he was in a thrash metal band back in high school.
Oh my God! We need to have him talk about that.
I'm sorry if
Discord's
Luke, if you're
gonna
listening,
blow
and I outed you. I'm sorry, but I remember Relic, and you remember Relic.
I remember Relic. Let's pledge it out. Hereby,
I'm sorry. I solemnly commit myself to keep my hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the vehicle at all times while on this strange ride.
Starship is the grandchild of acid rock luminaries Jefferson Airplane via Jefferson Starship, who dropped the Jefferson in the 1980s and any connection to their original name. While musicians often leave bands to start other bands or pursue other projects, it's unusual in the history of rock to have such a clear lineage between three separate but directly connected musical groups. Every single member of Jefferson Airplane would be fired by the band or quit at least once over the next 20 years. And as members left, the group would change names and styles, first to the soulful, arena-rocking Jefferson Starship. I think I can go out on a limb and say one of, if not my absolute favorite band of that era. And after that, they would become the bubblegum popping, fully synthesized Starship, not to be confused with Jefferson Starship. So 1960s, Jefferson Airplane, 1970s, Jefferson Starship, 1980s, Starship. 1960, yeah, you got.
And then after that, they
That's
just
it.
died.
They ceased to be after 1989. Yeah.
They made that song and everyone was like, "Get away!"
Well, there's some. We'll get there. So because
Okay.
Jefferson Airplane comes back, but
Yeah, I was about to say, when I was looking through, I saw that there was not necessarily new albums, but new releases and stuff.
there was one new Jefferson Airplane album in the 80s. Yeah, after Grace Slick quit Starship, which left Starship with nobody who had been in the original band at that point.
Weird.
Well, Slick was never in the original band, but anyway, she was in Jefferson Airplane, but not. Well, let me tell you the story. Grace Slick is also, I think, my absolute favorite rocker of all time. So I'm gonna fanboy out the wazoo today. The way the band's three names morph into each other suggests a core identity that reveals the truth of Starship by way of the airplane. So just one more time so we got a real clear sense of this. Jefferson Airplane, 60s, acid rock, psychedelic rock. 70s, it's like soul, arena rock, kind of. They're not Journey exactly. In fact, I'm going to argue they're on the further edge of weird than Journey.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah. Especially if you listen to some of their B-side tracks. And then 80s, they are just pure pop. So it's
But you say that
change.
the planes connect them.
The names.
Yes.
So it's the Jefferson that connects the first two,
That's
and
what
the
I was
Starship
no,
that
but I
connects
was
the
gonna say.
second two.
I thought you were
Yes.
saying that their identity is based off of flying things, but I was like, well, what if it's based off of the Jeffersons?
Except that Jefferson drops by the time
Yeah,
you get to the
because all
last
the
iteration.
original band members were gone.
Yes, that's true.
Jeff left.
The provocateur and rock genius Grace Slick was the only person to perform in all three iterations of the band. But, as I just said, she was not there at the beginning. Let me tell you a story. Jefferson Airplane was founded by Martin Buchwald, also known as Marty Balin, and Paul Kantner. Marty, the son of a white Jewish father and white Episcopalian mother, was raised in a predominantly black neighborhood outside of San Francisco, where he developed a passion for gospel music. This is very common in early rockers. Elvis, for example, was heavily inspired by black musicians, and gospel music in particular. He admired black rockers, including Little Richard and Ray Charles, but he knew he couldn't make music like those artists. He said, I am not black, therefore, unlike Elvis, he said, I am not going to try to make that kind of music. He didn't have the same cultural background. He said, I have to create a different sound. I want to rock, but I can't create their sound. I have to create my own.
Nice.
Yeah, that's
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That sound took its inspiration from the folk scene that dominated San Francisco and the broader pop scene in the mid-'60s, typified by, of course, Bobby Dylan. And the Raiders. No, just Bob Dylan.
Oh, I was about to say,
Yeah.
that name sounds vaguely familiar.
No,
Doesn't he? He's
It's Paul
like,
Revere and the Raiders, who are not Bob Dylan.
He weirdly like speak talks, doesn't he? I mean, no, sing talks.
Bob Dylan is known for having a terrible singing voice.
Yeah.
He's an awful singer, but an amazing songwriter.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Because my stepdad, I remember when I was a kid, he would play Bob Dylan in the car, and I would get very upset because I was like, "This song sucks. Turn it off." And then he would play it to annoy me.
So my brother-in-law on my wife's side of things, my wife's sister's husband, it gets very mad about Bob Dylan because he can't sing. He's like, well, then why do we listen to him? Maybe the same thing you were doing in the car.
Probably.
Covers of Bob Dylan are amazing.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix's cover of All Along the Watchtower is one of the greatest recordings of all time.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
I mean, who
You
would you like
probably
to
have,
Maybe.
but you just probably don't recognize
I
it.
should say that, like, I do listen to a lot of music, but it's a lot of Broadway musical soundtracks.
Have you watched the movie Watchmen?
No. Surprisingly, I have not watched Watchmen.
They use a lot of like Bob Dylan covers in that, and a lot of Bob Dylan in that.
Also, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Pete Seeger and the Weavers, all of these were the folk scene who inspired Marty Balin, and really psychedelic rock generally. His partner in music, Paul Kantner, lost his mother, Cora, to polio when he was only 8 years old, and he was shipped off to military school. Odd beginning for a rock musician in San
I don't
Francisco.
know. I feel like the military makes you either like super strict or like super punk.
Breaks you.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
become-
well,
yeah,
exactly.
it breaks
I mean,
you in some
ruins
way.
your
It's
entire
just-
life,
you
but
break
no.
the military inside of you. As a young man, he quit a job at a cannery to focus on playing music.
Music is not something I was driven to do. I didn't want to become a quote-unquote musician. I wanted to participate in the culture. This was a nice vehicle that was both fun and it was educational, good feeling. It just gave me something intangible that was worth having and being involved with. So it wasn't a driving force. I'm not a driven musician who must practice 12 hours a day. I'm a songwriter who uses a guitar for colors and atmospheres and languages and rhythms.
Marty Balin met Paul Kantner at a club Balin played often called the Drinking Gourd.
Like a pumpkin drinking?
Yeah, well, it's like, you can drink out of a gourd if you hollow it out.
That
and-
makes a little bit more sense. I feel like that would be kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a good
But
name
it would
for a
be
club.
a really big drink.
Oh, it would be fun to drink from a gourd.
Oh, yeah. Yes, exactly.
You've completely forgot that it's a rock club,
Yes.
but that's what it's referred to.
Okay.
Anyhow, Kantner had been playing music for a couple of years at the Folklore Center, also coffee houses with people like Sherry Snow and David Crosby, when he got up on stage to play the Drinking Gourd solo. So yes, Kantner and David Crosby, and so Savannah knows nothing about rock music, but Mims does, so I'll look at Mims. Kantner and Crosby knew each other before they both ended up in bands that became famous. Yeah, they were friends before that.
Oh.
It's really cool.
Yeah, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. You've heard of those guys, right?
Could you repeat the name? I'm sorry.
Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young.
Sometimes without Young.
CSN? CSNY? All right,
No.
fine. Woodstock. Sweet
I was
Judy Blue
listening to
Eyes.
Hadestown earlier today. Is that,
Okay.
yeah.
Nope. That's separate thing. This is like my Five Nights at Freddy's episode. You have no idea what I'm talking
I have
about.
nothing to contribute to this conversation.
So the story goes, Kantner got up to play the Drinking Gourd by himself. None of his friends were there. The club didn't have a spot for him to play in, so Balin gave up his spot because he saw Kantner come in. He was like this, tall, skinny, goofy-looking guy with glasses, and he was like, I want to see what this guy's going to do. He was a weird-looking guy, said Balin. He started to play and then just stopped. He said, I can't do this. And he walked off stage.
What?
That's what Paul Kantner did the first time Marty Balin saw him play.
That's amazing. But also, like, that
Yeah,
dude gave up his spot for him and he just
like-
walked away.
He was like, screw it. I can't stand this.
nah.
I don't feel this.
But now, see, the original time I read that story, it didn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then from Kantner's perspective, he said that the crowd was noisy and wasn't paying any attention to him.
Oh.
So he
See,
said,
I
screw
was
this.
going to say, he's like, there's no one drinking out of pumpkins here. So I'm leaving.
What's the fucking point?
But now there were too many people
Too many
drinking out of
pumpkin drinks.
pumpkins.
Yes, too many pumpkin drinks. This needed to be resolved. So, Balin and Kantner decided to create their own club, The Matrix, to perform in because, again, Balin saw
Matrix?
this, watched this guy walk off stage and said, I need to be in a band with that man.
That's amazing. amazing. I love that.
That's how you choose bandmates. You just find weirdos that like, I want to be friends with that person. I want to spend time in a van with that motherfucker.
Yeah,
That's
you have to.
basically
Yeah.
what we've done here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
No, like the whole Alchemical Actors thing, what kind of drew me to it is it's punk rock as fuck.
Oh,
Yeah, I think
we're
that's true.
punk rock?
We're pretty punk
I'm
rock.
probably not.
You should see our reviews.
Like the whole do-it-yourself attitude to it.
Yeah, that's true. Balin and Kantner, as I said, created their own club called The Matrix to perform in before that had anything to do with Keanu Reeves. They recruited bass player Bob Harvey and drummer Jerry Peliquin and vocalist Signe Ann Tolley, none of whom would stay past the band's first album. They also brought in Jorma Kaukonen, a lead guitarist who had grown up in Washington, D.C., but also toured the world because of his father's job working for American intelligence. In mid-1965, he was on his way to the Soviet Union with his parents after graduating from college when he met the 20-year-old Swede Margareta Lena Pettersson, who moved out to live with him in California and married him shortly afterward. Kaukonen first met Kantner when they were both attending Santa Clara University. Kantner, by the way, dropped out, of course, before finishing, because, military school and all.
Oh,
Broke him for
I bet.
like establishment anything, right? It's not going to sit well with Kantner.
That's fair.
and there's too many people drinking gourds here.
Too many drinking gourds at this college. You people need to settle down and listen to me play. And he auditioned for the band after he'd been confined to San Francisco, Kaukonen that is, by the justice system. So let me tell you this story. So Jorma Kaukonen,
Confined to San Francisco?
yes,
Is that
yes, you can be confined to a city
that?
by the law.
Because I know there's house arrest and then there's jail, but then they're like, you have full reign of the city, but you can't pass this part.
It's more like you're not allowed to leave because your wife is. Let me tell you the story. Kaukonen was teaching guitar and thinking about hitting the road when a police officer mistook his wife, Margareta, for a prostitute and started to handcuff her. But
What?
yes, but his wife, Margareta, was pretty tough. She was unwilling to be handcuffed, so she started wailing on the policeman.
Fuck yeah, let's go.
Hell yeah.
And
That's
eventually,
punk as shit, right?
That's punk rock as fuck.
she eventually had to be hauled off to jail by 7 police
Oh
officers.
my god, I'm in love with this woman.
I mean,
this is amazing.
She is Swedish. So, Kaukonen's father used his connections to get them out of trouble, but they had to stay in San Francisco because of the legal proceedings.
Because she had to beat up more cops.
Yes, because she needed to keep the police in line. So Kaukonen auditioned for Kantner and Balin's new band. It's sort of like a bit of kismet because he goes on to be like the major guitarist associated with the band.
Wait, so the reason he can't leave is because he needs to be around when he gets called to court and stuff?
Yeah, basically.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
That makes way more sense than you being a criminal, but being like, oh, but the city's okay. You just can't go
It's just fucking
outside of
escape
it.
from New York.
I think more to do with his wife and all her legal. Anyway,
gotcha.
The lineup wasn't complete, however, because we're still missing our bass player. Harvey, the original bass player, turned out to be the wrong fit. He was a bluegrass player, and Balin and Kantner wanted to take the band away from folk and more toward a rock sound. So you can't do the bluegrass thing.
When I think of a bluegrass bassist, I think of like an upright bassist, just doom,
Yeah.
doom, doom, doom. Like,
Yeah, it's not exactly George Harrison, is
yeah.
it? So Kaukonen called up an old friend from D.C. named Jack Cassidy. Cassidy had been hospitalized for rheumatic fever as a child and survived and dove into living life on his own terms. He started playing clubs at the age of 15, and at 18 he had 40 students he was teaching guitar to in Bethesda, Maryland.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, he's one of ours. And he began attending Montgomery Community College. He's another one. He's
Nice,
one of ours in many
community
ways.
college.
Yeah. Cassidy had a big handlebar mustache, and when he flew out to audition for Jefferson Airplane, Kantner told him he hated the mustache and had to shave it off.
A coward.
I love Paul Kantner. He's such a pain in the ass. Also, Kantner wasn't happy with Peliquin's... let me finish that story. So Cassidy cut half of it off and did a whole set that way.
I
all day.
love that. Every single one of these people are so weird.
And then he just shaved the other half off. But for one night, he did perform with half of a
I
mustache.
love that. I love that.
An intensely 60s
These
thing to do.
people are my heroes.
They really are. See, you can see why I love them so much. Also, Kantner also wasn't happy with Peliquin's drumming. Sorry. When Peliquin, a part-time optometrist, went out to help Kantner fix his glasses one afternoon, he returned to find Paul Kantner, whose glasses he was out fixing, interviewing other drummers.
Oh my god!
So shitty.
Paul Kantner, I do love him. I love his music. I think he was a genius, but yeah, he's
He's a dick.
he's a bit of a dick.
Hey, thanks for my glasses. Get the fuck out.
Yes. Kantner, so the optometrist comes back, Peliquin, and immediately begins wailing on Kantner because Kantner's auditioning
Oh my
drummers.
god! They gotta get the guy's wife
It's
in there.
Margareta. Yeah, we gotta call Margareta. So Balin then cut Peliquin from the band for wailing on his partner. And he was replaced by Skip Spence, a guitar player who Balin co-opted into drumming for the Airplane. So Skip was actually originally a guitar player, but as Mims knows, sometimes we double up.
Can't fucking
There's a
find
lot
drummers.
more wailing on each other in this story
there
than
will
I
be.
was.
We've only just begun the wailing. There will be much more wailing. The Airplane started at the Matrix, the club that Balin and Kantner put together, and then began playing clubs around the city. They received rave reviews from the local music critics, most notably the jazz critic Ralph Gleason and John Wasserman, who were largely responsible for creating their national reputation. They were signed by RCA that same year and released their first single, It's No Secret, in February 1966, having replaced their drummer yet again, this time with Spencer Dryden, a nephew of Charlie Chaplin's. Who, yeah, how about that? Like Paul Kantner, had gone to military school as well, Spencer Dryden.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I just want to say that one more time. I think it's important to realize how people get famous. The Airplane largely owe it to Ralph Gleason, this one jazz critic who only generally wrote about jazz, and rock music was still fairly new, especially in San Francisco, but he took the time to go to their show, watched them on stage, and said, the music they're creating is good and important, and you people should listen.
Wow.
And this is why RCA ultimately, I think, picked them up.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were found by a jazz guy.
Yeah. Well, you sort of had to be because rock was so new. There weren't really rock critics. So the jazz guys had to be willing to try something new. So in part, it was Gleason's openness to the new music. It's really a lesson to all of us because here we are talking about Ralph Gleason, right? His claim to fame at this moment for us is that he was willing to open his mind to the Airplane.
Yeah. I will say that, I don't only listen to Broadway music.
Now Savannah's feeling self-conscious.
But seriously, I listen to music on YouTube, not on Spotify.
All right.
And YouTube will suggest me new songs all the time. And in my YouTube rap, it told me my most listened to thing was independent music.
See, now Spotify's not going to recommend this episode to anyone.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah, I use Apple Music, so we're fine.
I love you, Spotify. I love you, you Swedish app, you. You're just like Margareta. Although the whole band, I'm in love with you. Although the whole band experimented with LSD, please be good to me. Although the whole band I need you, Swedish daddy.
Oh, my God, stop! Carry on with the story.
Although the whole band experimented with LSD, let's talk about Skip Spence a little bit. He developed an addiction to LSD, which is, I don't think, very common.
No.
That you don't hear about it very often, and I don't fuck with any of that.
No,
but
it's intense.
I feel like that's not great to develop an addiction to.
No.
No.
And I also feel like, don't they say that that's the kind of drug that you can't get an addiction to or whatever?
The hallucinogens, I think that's a claim, but I've seen evidence that mushrooms and all the microdosing can.
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
go
Get
in that
addicted
direction,
to
yeah.
anything.
No, that's what I was thinking too.
I'm addicted to boulder skate.
Same. Same.
I have an unhealthy relationship with podcasting. So Spence developed this addiction, and he was taken to bouts of paranoia. So let me tell you a couple of stories about how Skip Spence doesn't stay with the band. Driving with Kantner one night, he demanded to be let out of the car just on the side of the road. And hours later, Kantner was driving back from wherever he was, and he found him in the exact same location where he had left him.
What?
He just spent hours sitting on the side of the road in that same spot or doing whatever he was doing.
Did he pick him back up?
Yeah,
Or just
he did.
did
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
good.
He wasn't like, oh, weird. But it would be a Kantner thing to do, I guess. After he ran off to Mexico, Spence that is, and didn't return for months, he just disappeared to Mexico.
Whoa. No.
Like it should be like if Savannah just went away and I got to figure out how to do Strange Ride and Call Confessions. And
The
many
60s,
other things.
What else are you going to do?
Yeah, he must be in Mexico. But of course, the band determined that he was not committed enough to their work. And that's how they ended up replacing Spence with Dryden, not to be confused with Skip Spence, Spencer Dryden. Their names are kind of familiar, but similar.
I too have fired somebody for running away to Mexico.
Really?
No, I wish.
Seemed
Damn.
possible.
Could you imagine?
What were we talking about? Kantner, for his part, Kantner did not believe that drugs played a major role in what the Airplane were doing, despite their prevalence in psychedelic rock.
I think marijuana, being the Catholic boy that I was, gave me a sort of outlaw badge, given the prescribed prescriptions that had been put against it throughout the 50s. Drugs were not, and this may seem a little bit silly to say or to listen to, but in the 60s, drugs were not a huge part of what was going on. Drugs were just like a dessert at a good meal.
So he's saying, I guess, the culture, the scene, that was the main thing. He's not even really necessarily saying the music was the main thing. He's saying the scene was the main thing, and the drugs were just, like, on top of it.
Okay.
Again, it's the 60s.
It's the 60s.
Everybody's on drugs.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Their first album, The Airplane, was released in August and sold roughly 20,000 copies in California, where the band was known. The rest of the country really didn't know who they were, and it's almost hard for us to imagine this now, but this used to be... This is true still, but for the most part, I think local acts tend to stay more local.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like with the internet and less focus on like regional radio airplay,
I listen to TMD out of Baltimore, so I am familiar with Baltimore artists and like Eastern Shore artists even more because of that. But yeah, like you're saying, Mims, the internet tends to be where...
Honestly, the fact that anybody became like worldwide famous back then is insane to me, because it's like I don't know.
Yeah, how could they do it?
Yeah, how did they spread the information
It took the
like
record
that?
company. It was the record companies and their resources that allowed that to happen.
spending like shit tons of money to bring certain people to certain places.
So changes in staff weren't quite over. Signe Tolley, now Signe Tolley Anderson, had just had her first child, Lilith, good choice of name, Signe, and decided that she couldn't be a mother and a singer in a rock and roll band. Lilith, by the way, is also an excellent song out of Kantner's solo career. He did a song called Lilith, which I think may or may not have been a tribute to Signe Tolley Anderson's child. I'm not sure. But I think it definitely is a reference to the mythological Lilith. Anyhow.
Which we made a whole episode about on the other podcast. Alchemical Confessions.
The pressures.
Topical.
I was also on that one. That was fun to talk about.
Yeah, Lilith was a good story. So Signe Tolley Anderson has a baby, and believe it or not, the pressures of touring with a baby were starting to wear on her. It was the 60s, and people did, attempt these things, but the band persuaded her to stay on long enough to sing at the Monterey Jazz Festival, but eventually Anderson said, that's it, I'm going to go be a mom.
Yeah, I don't blame her.
I don't want to do this anymore.
I mean, it's so stressful to put on shows at all that I couldn't imagine having a baby on top of that. Like, oh my God.
So, but it's weird to think of. It's like, that fifth Beatle, right? Paul Best was best. Yeah. Like, what is it like to be that guy? Signe Tolley Anderson is, I think, that guy of Jefferson Airplane. Yes, there were a lot of people who left, but Anderson was the one who could have stayed on in theory. But Anderson said she never regretted her decision. She never thought twice about it. She was fine. Like, they became world famous, but she could have cared less.
I mean, she had like writing credits on that first album.
Yeah.
After they blew up, that album sold like freaking hotcakes.
She made some money, yeah. She for the rest of her life, she made royalties.
I mean,
on
honestly, that's all you need. I'd rather have the money than being famous like that.
And I guess arguably maybe they could not have become world famous without Grace Slick, because Grace Slick writes their original hits.
Oh.
So she was replaced by Grace Slick, who the band had shared a bill with when she was performing with her husband and brother-in-law in a group called The Great Society, which was a sarcastic reference to Lyndon Johnson's domestic policy agenda intended to distribute aid to the needy. Frank Zappa also makes fun of The Great Society. A lot of the hippies had issues with The Great Society. They didn't feel like it was really adequately serving people in need. So Slick, being sarcastic, the band is named after this policy that the hippies think is ridiculous. She was born Grace Wing in a classic white Anglo-Saxon Protestant home and called her life an exercise in counter-programming. She spent her childhood acting out What she means by that is everything she did as an adult was a way to counter-program her childhood.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
I
It's
understand.
a bit like Cantner in a way.
Okay.
She was an only child until her brother Chris was born when she was 9. And she spent most of her childhood acting out skits and pretending that she lived in the 18th century.
Whoa. That's a little weird.
She's pretty intense. She enjoyed going out to 5-star restaurants with her parents, who were quite wealthy, and aspired to be one of the popular girls, but was thrown out of her friend group for being too sarcastic. I think you're going to like her, Savannah. I love her so much. She attended Finch College, a finishing school in New York, mostly because she wanted to hang out in New York.
Fair enough.
Respectable.
Yeah, it's a good reason. She had no desire to attend a finishing school, but that's what her parents would let her do, like in New York.
I mean, if you're a wealthy person, isn't that what is like the thing? Is like the wealthy kids go there to just party anyway, to college, I mean? So
Yeah, she wanted to hang out in the city, and she sought out Odetta in Greenwich Village after she snuck back behind the folk legend's dressing room, and she played guitar for her after her show. So Slick was also like, imagine, this folk idol, and you not only sneak into her dressing room, but you insist on playing music for her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she was bold. She is bold. This is a bold
I don't even
woman.
know. It's more than bold, whatever
Yeah,
it is.
like I want to shake her hand.
Oh, wait, you just wait. She's going to upset you and delight you throughout this episode.
I mean, that one upsets me. I hate it when people play guitar at me. So it's like,
Well, Odetta does that for a living, so it's sort of like a professional,
okay, I guess that's fair.
give me your opinion.
But it'd be like if someone came in here and was like, Savannah, let me monologue for you.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah.
No, please.
She'd be a little bit flattered, a little bit annoyed. After she left Finch, she went to the University of Miami, but she wasn't there very long. Her friend Darlene Ermakoff wrote to her about the burgeoning hippie scene in San Francisco, and Grace Wing came home to live with her parents and find out what fun there was to be had in the nascent counterculture. So her friend's like, what are you doing in Miami? It's super badass in San Francisco now. Everyone's high and naked. And Grace is like, okay, here I come.
Tell me less.
You had
Get me on that plane.
You had me at naked. She wasn't really like that, but she married Jerry Slick, an old family friend who had been in her 6th grade class, and she modeled dresses for the I. Magnin Couturier department store while Jerry went to film school. The first music she wrote was for one of Jerry's movies, for which he won first prize at the Ann Arbor Film Festival. And she took road trips with her husband and her friend Darlene, and Darlene's husband, who, by the way, was a former 40s quiz show contestant. His name was Ira Lee. And they all went together down to Mexico to experiment with drugs and the hippie culture south of the border.
Oh, did they run into pelicans? Yeah. Down there? Was it the
No.
that
Pelicran was the optometrist.
Yeah.
Spence
sorry.
was the one that all the drummers. You're keeping track of the drummers, though. You were right that it was drummers. Slick said that she and her husband made up their minds to form a rock band after a night watching and listening to Jefferson Airplane at the Matrix.
Well, that's really cool.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? The Airplane was making more money on folk rock than Slick was making on showroom modeling, so it made good financial sense to her to just be a rock star.
Yeah.
I wish that was financially viable.
Jerry's brother Darby already knew how to play guitar, and they brought on a male singer named David Miner and a saxophonist and a bass player. A recording contract. You can listen. There's one Great Society album you can still listen to, but the Great Society broke up after only 1 year. Darby Slick and the saxophonist Peter Van Gelder had decided to go to India to study the sitar, and so they just left the 60s.
That is so interesting.
It sucks that we weren't all just born in the 60s, or they didn't just keep going so that we could all decide to go play the sitar in India and just leave.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I had that kind of freedom.
Right? It was 1966, and Signe Tolley Anderson had just quit the Airplane when my boys went off to India. Jack Cassidy approached Slick at the Avalon Ballroom, and she quickly accepted his offer to sing for the Airplane. Slick said, "This was an initiation, an invitation to hold what I'd always thought was a lofty position reserved only for supermodels, movie stars, and great physical beauties ad nauseum. It felt like the flat-chested, kinky, brown-haired, sarcastic bitch was breaking down another barrier in Barbie land." This
Hell
is
of a
Slick's
quote.
attitude. Yeah, this is Slick's attitude, which again, I
Did she say that?
Yes, Slick said that about herself. she talks about herself in a very self-deprecating fashion, which again endears me to her so much. But she also has this, she really doesn't have a chip on her shoulder, but she has this hang up about not being the popular girl, like going back to when she was 12. She's always obsessed with the fact that she's not the popular girl. I need to take that quote and now qualify it with a bunch of stuff. Okay. Although self-deprecating to a fault, Slick would become one of the great sex symbols of the hippie era despite herself. She's a beautiful woman. And not all rock stars, even in the 60s, fit conventional white blonde Barbie standards. So her concept that all the rock stars were white is Cass Elliot, for example, better known as Mama Cass, was famous for her weight, which was actually the subject of her music. No one's getting fat except Mama Cass. And Janis Joplin was sexy for her attitude and her voice, but not really her looks. And Janis and Grace were friends. Then there were the black women, breaking the color barrier. So again, not all white Barbies, with music that crossed over, appealing to white and black audiences. This list is long, just to name a few. We have Diana Ross and the Supremes, the Ronettes, Mary Wells, Tammy Terrell, who sang with Marvin Gaye, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, Tina Turner, Dionne Warwick, and Aretha Franklin. All very attractive women. All not white Barbies.
Gotcha.
So that was Slick's perspective, is all I'm trying to say on this accomplishment. It's also the case that Slick was not exactly ascending to stardom when she was drafted by the Airplane. While the Great Society was only ever an opening act for the Airplane, so she was like moving up a tier, their fame was more or less limited to California. The Airplane was still not nationally known.
It's a big state.
It's, relatively. Electoral college-wise, yes.
Better to be big in California than to be small nowhere.
I was about to say,
or big in Rhode Island.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, you could fit 50 Marylands in California, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, that's a big state.
We're more densely populated, but yes, there are many more people in California. And it's also really Northern California, if I'm being honest. Not so much LA, more like the San Francisco area. So they had yet to break through into the national and international rock market, and it would be Slick, as I mentioned earlier, who helped them actually achieve that transition. When she joined the Airplane, Slick brought with her 2 songs that would become the most popular songs on their iconic second album, Surrealistic Pillow, an album that I owned as a CD originally when you were in Columbia CD Club, and they would send you one in the mail. Everything about that doesn't exist anymore. CDs, the mail.
I remember hearing about the Columbia Record Club
yes.
through a Weird Al song.
I was very much a member. So that was the first Jefferson Airplane album that I owned in CD form. So the songs that Slick wrote were Somebody to Love, which was actually, she didn't write that. That was written by her brother-in-law, Darby Slick, who was gone now in India. So she got to bring the song with her. And then her own song, White Rabbit, which was a take on Lewis Carroll's Alice stories. You guys have now, you knew those songs already.
I'm more familiar with the Alice in Wonderland story from that song than I am the Disney movie.
Although Slick plays with the details of the plot, yes. So, with a Spanish bolero beat and that feels a bit like a military march, Slick tells her listeners in White Rabbit that one pill makes you larger and one pill makes you small, and the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all. In part, said Slick, the lyrics allude to the hypocrisy of the older generation swilling one of the hardest drugs, namely alcohol, known to man, not telling us and telling the kids not to use psychedelics. So mom and dad are getting drunk and saying you can't smoke pot and drop LSD.
Okay.
So many children's stories, she says, also contain drug references. Peter Pan sprinkles fairy dust on the darling children to get them to fly, and Dorothy sees the Emerald City after falling asleep in a poppy field. Then there's Alice chomping on mushrooms and her hashish smoking caterpillar friend. So Grace Slick is just picking up on all these things and saying, look, kids, drugs. Jefferson Airplane wanted to create a revolution in and through culture, specifically music, that the whole world would join. This created a tension in their work. They were subversive, but they also sold subversion through a record label to the youth of the Western world. This tension is very important to my story today, and is evident in both the Great Society songs that Jefferson Airplane recorded, their highest charting hits. both of these songs. So let's look at them. Somebody to Love, which Slick describes, don't you want somebody to love? Do you know this song?
Oh, I listened to that one.
there you
He
go.
sent us a playlist, and I did listen to all of them, but I think that it didn't. They didn't sit with me, like only in the sense that I think I was really tired, and so.
And nobody was a puppet in any of them. I'm kidding. The musicals.
Okay, but like, what are you talking about? Avenue Q?
Or Rocky Little Shop of Horrors, or
Oh.
yeah. Anyhow,
You could add a puppet.
you can always add a puppet. They didn't add a puppet.
It would be easier for me to watch it, probably. I mean, but I wasn't watching it. I was listening to it, which is also another problem for me. I feel like I need something visually to help me.
YouTube. So let's go back to Somebody to Love.
Bitch.
Slick describes the song as an inversion of a traditional love song, with the singer looking to give love rather than celebrating or mourning how he or she receives love.
I liked the song.
Bit subversive.
I thought it was cool.
That peaked at number 5 in June of 1967 and remained on the Billboard's charts for 15 weeks. The song's lyrics were actually ever so slightly too sexual for the record label. The listening public heard, "Yours, I say, your eyes may look like his, but in your head, I'm afraid you don't know where it is." The original lyrics, which you can hear on some of their live albums, were, "In bed, I'm afraid you don't know where it is."
Oh.
Yeah.
It's amazing how like the acceptability of things that we would consider
Tame.
silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear explicit references to sex now in perfectly normal radio play songs.
Yeah.
But this was a different time. Airplane really broke down some of these boundaries, and I'll tell you how. But White Rabbit, with its countercultural drug message, peaked at number 8 the next month and stayed on the charts for 10 weeks. So, were the Airplanes subversive or were they commercial? Slick tells a story about a performance in the Midwest for an audience of teenagers dressed in formal wear who sat politely and listened to them play. When the band came back next year, though, she said, everyone in the audience had grown out their hair and were covering themselves in body paint and dancing naked in the aisles.
Okay.
So there was this huge cultural change within a year of them touring to this Midwestern town. She's not saying that the Airplane did that,
Yeah.
but she's saying that they were a kind of cultural export from San Francisco that was slowly moving through the country. So they brought a bit of that scene, but they weren't the only source.
reason, but they helped spread.
They were part of that tapestry of counterculture that was working its way through the country. In New Orleans, the entire band was arrested, except for Slick, who was in the shower getting ready to go out with the boys after the show. Otherwise, she would have been arrested.
What did they get arrested for?
Well, they stuffed towels under the door, but the security guards smelled marijuana coming from their room, and everyone in the room was hauled downtown by the police. So the band is getting into trouble. They are breaking the law, is what I'm trying to say. The late 60s were not a period of free love and turning on and dropping out for everybody. I think that's also like, we listen to their music and we just assume everybody's a hippie, but that's not true. The hippies are rebelling against a standard, 1950s culture that hasn't gone away. The parents, all these people are still arresting them. A lot of America and the world were still as square as we are today. In my opinion, we've gone much squarer than we were in the 60s, even though we have more sex in our lyrics. We also have less sex with each other today than we used to.
It's a really interesting, I don't know, it's like ships passing in the night,
Yeah.
right past each other.
The Airplane tossed doses of acid into their crowds. They got people riled up. They tried to win converts to the age of Aquarius. Paul Kantner criticized the police for cutting out the lights to observe a town curfew at a performance, and he was thrown in jail for inciting a riot.
For a second, I thought you meant the band, the police, and not
Sting.
the
No.
fuzz.
Sting's still a decade ahead of us. Earlier in Bakersfield, California, Kantner encouraged the audience of 5,000 to dance despite a city ordinance against people under 16 dancing. Think about the world
What the
we're in.
fuck?
This is California.
What kind of footloose ass
yeah, I was about to
bullshit?
say, that's the plot of Footloose, isn't
It is
it?
the plot of Footloose. Some of those 16-year-olds might be, so the crowd was not all under 16, but they could have been there. So under that premise, they were not allowed to dance. And so the police had to come to enforce the rule. So it wasn't just like one of those rules like you're not allowed to have a llama in a bathtub. This was...
Like an actually enforced
Yes,
rule.
Bakersfield used this to keep people from dancing at concerts. So Kantner,
What in
this
the
is what Paul
hell?
Kantner did, and we're going to love him again for being the man that he is. Or that he was. He pointed out to the crowd how few police officers there were and how many audience members there were.
Oh my god.
And said, go ahead, get up and dance. What are they going to do?
That's amazing.
Fuck yes.
Speaking of fuck, Slick was nearly busted in Dallas, Texas for saying fuck on stage, which the police recorded. This
Damn.
apparently violated a local ordinance against apparently saying fuck on stage.
He was set up.
Slick. This is Grace Slick now.
She was set up. Sorry,
she was. They brought
Yeah.
it for that. They were waiting for
Yeah,
somebody to
they
say
were.
something. And Grace Slick is nothing if not unapologetic about what she says on stage. She talked herself out of the arrest, though, because she is a good talker.
Nice.
And in Ohio, the police formed a barrier between the stage and the audience. So all of this, I mean, this is the scene these guys are performing in. Slick's quote,
All along the front of the stage stood a row of 25 officers, arms linked in riot style, creating a barrier. Their heads covered with bulletproof visors, their hips loaded with clubs and guns. They formed a line between the audience and us like a bizarre group of armored, hairy chorus girls.
That's insane.
Yeah, like
They're
that's
at a concert.
yes.
that's the type of shit that like it makes me. I don't know if any of y'all have seen the Straight Outta Compton movie, but it makes me think of the scene where the cops are just like, you're not allowed to play "fuck the police," and so they played "fuck the police."
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
This
That's what
is
you do.
music. I mean,
Yeah,
this
it's
is what music can do.
It's what music is for, if you ask me.
That is so. I can't imagine that. So they were there to like prevent people from dancing.
The cops were always there in one way or another. Not that line of cops. That line of.
Okay.
I mean, the view is the state views or whatever. I mean, I'm saying the state, but whatever government group views the band itself as subversive and potentially dangerous to society, which is why the cops are always present.
Wow, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine.
It's not happened at a Taylor Swift concert, I'll tell you that. Well,
No,
they're
but
there, but for a different reason.
They have to wheel her out in trash cans, though. So that have you not heard? I heard this the
good
other day,
Lord.
where like because the fans are so crazy and they can't like know where she's going or whatever, she like gets into like a trash can or something and they wheel her out.
That's kind of hilarious.
Get it
And, like,
together, ladies.
I kind of want to like just check trash cans outside of like
I have something to toss out here.
outside of like the M&T Bank Stadium next time she's in Baltimore or
Check
something.
them. I want to wait outside with some old Chinese food. Jack Cassidy's brother, Chick, objected to police manhandling an audience member, so they maced him. The police.
Oh my god!
Slick and Kantner objected to Chick getting maced, so they maced them too. And took all three of them to jail.
Oh my
Like
god!
mid-show?
Get up!
I mean, this is, I think, after the show, but yeah.
This is
Well, because the
infuriating.
police had manhandled an audience member during their performance. So so Cassidy's brother Chick was like, hey man, what are you doing? How come you were messing with these guys? And so they maced him, and then they maced Grace Slick.
That
and
is insane.
they maced Paul Kantner. Because the two of them, Grace Slick and Paul Kantner, are constantly speaking their minds.
Good for them.
Yeah.
It just
yeah.
sucks to get maced.
It sucks to
I
get
can't
maced.
imagine.
Yeah. Slick's act on stage was a revolution onto itself. Let me talk specifically about what it. Oh. Grace Slick quit performing. Basically, she gave maybe 2 or 3 performances in like after Starship, so it's not possible. It hasn't been possible to see Grace Slick perform for decades. But had we been alive, had we been born earlier, it would have been a sight to see Grace Slick on stage. Let me tell you why. She had a kind of Dadaist aesthetic that shocked and offended, but without taking on any easily identifiable targets or meanings. You can actually see some of her stuff because she appeared on a lot of late night shows with the Airplane. When an audience member asked if she wore a chastity belt, she lifted up her skirt to show him that she didn't even wear underwear.
Whoa. That is technically a crime.
Yes.
So,
Do you think she cares?
no, absolutely not. She does not.
On an episode of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, she smeared dark makeup over her face and concluded the group's song with a Black Power salute.
Nice.
It's still not, but the blackface is not so
Yeah.
nice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
the Black
that
Power
did not
salute-
register to me.
But you see that, like, it's confusing. Like,
Yeah.
what is she saying? Slick was clear that she wasn't making a statement about blackface, but it wasn't exactly apparent what statement she was making. I'm going to quote her.
Black. That's the right color for singing White Rabbit, I thought. I wasn't interested in some funny Al Jolson look, though. I wanted to get in it as real as possible. The trouble was that my features were angular and not right for the part, so apparently none of the viewers even noticed that was in this special makeup. Maybe it was just getting harder to shock the couch potatoes.
So she was trying to offend people intentionally and also voice solidarity with black people. Very strange, right?
Yeah, that is really
She's
weird.
confused, but she's got the spirit.
She's just wants to, like jam her finger in somebody's eye. Slick was a hardcore liberal, and so I want to be clear that she had no intention of punching down with her performance, whatever we want to read into it. The choice was avant-garde, meant to offend, but not to offend anyone in particular. I want to mention the Wooster Group in the 1980s, 90s made a similar choice in their production of The Emperor Jones. At another performance, Slick wore a Hitler mustache and a Nazi jacket and goose-stepped around the stage.
Okay.
Remember, she's way into satire, so she's also satirizing the culture that she's a member of as a rich white person. The actor Rip Torn joined her dressed as Nixon. And Rip Torn, if you watched the Larry Sanders Show on HBO, Rip Torn is his producer on that show. Anyhow, and Kantner and Slick actually contemplated building a musical version of Richard III featuring the airplane and Rip Torn as Richard III as Richard Nixon, but it never came to be.
Sounds pretty complicated.
Kind of want to see it.
Yes. So it was ultimately going to be a critique of the Nixon administration somehow using Richard III and psychedelic
Then
rock.
you get into writing musicals, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. You got to
a
get
lot of
puppets
work.
involved. Slick was actually invited to a tea party at the White House by Richard Nixon's daughter, Tricia.
Oh my God.
Let me tell you this story.
Oh my God.
This is one of Slick's best stories. Tricia had attended Finch 10 years after Slick. So what Tricia did was she wanted to get all the Finch girls together. And Grace Slick happened to have been a Finch girl.
Oh,
You got me?
Oh.
And Tricia put Slick on the guest list. When members of the social committee objected, one of Slick's suite mates spoke up for her and the invitation stood. So this is, I think, the misconception. Tricia Nixon did put together this list of ladies, like from Finch girls. And so Slick was a Finch girl. So it feels like it was oops, like Tricia made a mistake. But people pointed out to her, Grace here, Grace Wing, she's actually this wildly subversive, vagina-showing rocker. And Tricia was like, no, it's cool. I want to meet her. Tricia Nixon did want to meet Grace Slick.
Okay.
That's what I think that's misunderstood about this story. It takes some of the comedy away from the story, but it is true that Tricia Nixon was interested in interacting with Grace Slick. So when Grace Slick showed up at the party, she brought the political agitator Abby Hoffman, who, if you don't know anything about Abby Hoffman, look up Abby Hoffman on YouTube. You'll enjoy yourself. Abby Hoffman was at her side as her bodyguard. Abby Hoffman was part of like an exorcism of the Pentagon. Like Abby Hoffman did all kinds of bizarre stuff. And she was turned away as a security risk for having brought Abby Hoffman. Yeah.
Oh, so she didn't get to go in?
It was a good thing for Nixon because she had brought LSD with her and was planning to slip it into his tea in the hope that his acid trip would somehow prompt him to end the U.S.'s involvement in Vietnam.
Well, that's a leap.
that would have changed the course of history.
She very nearly ended our involvement in Vietnam with one drop of acid.
Also, probably would have landed herself in jail for a very long time.
Oh, maybe she got caught.
For a bit. After the Secret Service asked her to leave, Tricia Nixon and her mother sent for security to find her because they wanted to meet her, but Slick and Hoffman had already gone, so the meeting never happened.
Damn.
So there's a bit of Grace Slick for you, but there will be much more. Then there was the airplane's relationship with their record company. RCA gave them fairly free hand to make music, since the record executives didn't entirely understand the new San Francisco sound. The sound, which was, so they knew people liked it, but they didn't know why or what was good about it. They were just like, do your thing.
Isn't that the thing with most executives, though? You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Artistic executive.
Except at Spotify. The sound...
I'm gonna let you say that, Rob.
where we look forward to being heavily featured in getting many impressions for this episode. The San Francisco Sound, which was also being developed by bands like the Grateful Dead and Big Brother and the Holding Company, who would ultimately play with Janis Joplin, was something new in and of itself. Rock music in the hands of these musicians was moving away from the twee ballads of young love and loss into something new. It's mostly what you hear in the 60s is a lot of these love songs. But what what Airplane is up to and the Grateful Dead, the subjects are all over the place.
Okay.
There were new infusions of Eastern musical styles, the influence of mind-altering substances, which lent a surrealistic flavor to the lyrics and the sound, and the artful blend of folk music with rock, incorporating a socio-political edge in artists like Dylan and Seeger. Also, of course, the Airplane, etc., etc. The Airplane didn't align themselves with a particular political platform, but many of their songs like White Rabbit and Plastic Fantastic Lover were deeply critical of the society around them. Plastic Fantastic Lover, the title actually refers to TV and a culture obsessed with TV. The Plastic Fantastic Lover is the TV. The lyrics were regularly censored through their 1969 Volunteers album. That was the first album that wasn't censored. Potential allusions to drug use were routinely excised, even if they had nothing at all to do with drug use. The record company would just guess, this feels like it could be about drugs. We're taking that out.
God, that is so shit.
Sex also had its limits in the way the band wrote about it. With Volunteers, their 1969 album, they pressed RCA to let them leave the line, "Tear down the walls, motherfucker," in their song We Can Be Together, successfully arguing that RCA had released the cast recording of Hair, musicals, that contained language that was similar, if not worse. But because it was a Broadway musical, RCA didn't think twice, because it had already received a lot of play in front of, like, middle-brow audiences.
Nice.
Airplane looked at that and said, well, how come we can't say motherfucker, but the cast of Hair can?
See, me talking about Broadway came into it.
Is that like
works.
one of the first big F-bombs in music? In like
Yes,
popular music?
in rock music, I think that may be the first motherfucker. Perhaps. I mean, the Beatles weren't saying motherfucker.
Yeah.
The Rolling Stones weren't saying motherfucker, and the Rolling Stones were supposed to be like badasses,
Yeah.
right? They were edgy, experimental, Beatles and Rolling Stones, but neither was as experimental as the Airplane. I want to say this, and I believe this. My dad was a Beatles guy. Love the Beatles. And I know the Beatles inside and out, and I sing the Beatles to my children, and I do also enjoy the Beatles. But they are not as experimental as the Airplane or
No.
Grateful Dead or, the San Francisco Sound was on the edge.
The weirdest thing from the Beatles is like Maxwell's Silver Hammer or
The White
Octopus's
Album.
Garden,
Yeah.
which I was listening to the other day because it was stuck in my head and wouldn't leave.
Yeah, all that White Album. And anyway. The Beatles, like the Beach Boys, got famous with boy-girl love songs and then worked their way into the harder, stranger, more challenging music as their careers progressed. Sgt. Pepper's was many albums in, right? They had long since established themselves. They were this in-sync style phenomenon. And then they did this other thing, which linked them up with this whole new rock scene. The Airplane never had a pop phase.
Oh.
And so that's also true that they never had a number one song, unlike the Beatles, who had dozens and dozens of them. White Rabbit and Somebody to Love were their only top 10 songs, and they were on their second album. Volunteers, perhaps their next most rock recognizable track, were the Volunteers of America, only rose to number 65. It was featured in the Forrest Gump soundtrack, so I think more people do recognize Volunteers. So number 65, that's all it got to. The Airplane were a commercial enterprise that sold records and concert tickets, and all the members got rich on their talent and success, but their music remained difficult for the most mainstream listeners. Let me give you an example. After Bathing at Baxter's, which is the name of their third studio release, remains mind-altering to listen to with lyrics and music that require attention and focus and are truly rewarding to hear even today. It opens with Kantner's The Ballad of You, Me, and Pooh Neal, which itself opens up with Kaukonen's guitar wailing feedback. The Beatles also did a bit of that. Kantner says, "Halfway down the stair is a stair where I sit and think about you and me, but I wonder, will the sun still see all the people going? Will the moon still hang in the sky when I die, when I'm high, when I die?" Slick contributed her song Rejoice, inspired by James Joyce's Ulysses. very literate person, Grace Slick, very literate rocker. She also contributed a song called Two Heads, featuring a Middle Eastern style guitar riff in which she asks, "No one will know you've gutted your mind, but what will you do with your bloody hands? Your lions are fighting with chairs, your arms are incredibly fat, your women are dying alive, if you've had any women at that." I mean, y'all need to take time, right?
Yes.
But this is heavy stuff. Your women are dying alive if you've had any women at that. Kantner says,
The heart of it was very experimental and very life-enhancing, life-supporting, and life-aggrandizing and celebrating. So that came through. It was probably one of our worst-selling albums, but it was the place where we took the largest steps forward in learning how to deal with the studio.
Slick's vocals echo around Balin's, and Balin's echo around Slick. So Airplane has two lead vocalists, female and male. It's not unique to them, but it is fairly unique to their sound. They often didn't rehearse or perfect that interplay. They did it in the studio. They did a lot of improvising. Harmonies weren't carefully constructed, unlike the Beach Boys or the Beatles, but the album came together over the course of 6 months from trial and error. 6 months they were going to the studio.
Yeah, that's...
Is that a long time?
Yeah.
Especially for the 60s.
You would go in for a couple weeks.
Yeah, Black Sabbath recorded their first album in 2 days.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well, because you're supposed to be on the road perfecting the music, then you come to the studio and you lay it down, and that's
I
it.
understand.
Even Fleetwood Mac, like in the 70s, were recording in a week or two. They
I
would
got you. So
have a
I'm
huge
sorry.
cocaine bender, and then they would have an album.
Right.
It also very much depends on the band, depends on the music, depends on how much they have written.
I think I understood. So those bands didn't take like 2 days to write the album. They had written it beforehand. Okay,
For the most,
I
but
understand.
sometimes they would write songs as they were working on the album. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah, like the Beatles, they would sometimes like turn one out overnight, or Elton John, Anyhow, but 6 months they were working,
That
and
is a
RCA
long
was like,
And meanwhile, CCR did like 3 albums in a year.
Right.
In, like 69, 68.
Well, even if you think about the Beatles, like
Yeah.
their entire catalog was done in an incredibly short space of time. Kalkinen's guitar breaks into solos that feel improvised. You can't predict what any song will do next, and every surprise is, in my opinion, more of a revelation the stranger it is. Baxter's has all the hallmarks of 60s rock, but also does things that haven't been heard in nearly the same way before or since. They didn't care about the audience as much as their own creative process. That's what the 6 months was about.
That's what you have. That's what makes good art.
Right.
Yeah, you fuck around and you find out.
Yep.
Like that's
They wanted to do something cool and interesting. They didn't really want to create an earworm with a hook, and that's why Baxter's also wasn't great as far as radio play is concerned. 4 of the 8 albums to hold a #1 spot in 1967, by the way, were The Monkees, a band created for television, best known for being daydream believers who were not your stepping stone on this Pleasant Valley Sunday. 1968 saw the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel creating top records, but also Big Brother and the Holding Company and Jimi Hendrix. So you can see the change from 67 to 68. Within a year, counterculture music was finding its way into the mass market, but the Airplane remained always on the edge of that market. Surrealistic Pillow made it to number 3 on the album charts. Number 17, Crown of Creation, their 4th album, was number 6. Critically acclaimed, commercially viable, but never chart toppers, the Airplane. They weren't as artistically challenging as fellow Californian Frank Zappa or and his Mothers of Inventions, or for that matter, Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band. You know these guys, Mims?
No.
I know Frank Zappa. Who the
Oh,
fuck
you
was that
gotta
other
listen
one?
to Captain Beefheart. If you like Zappa, Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band, yeah, you're gonna like them.
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah,
real
Captain
quick.
Beefheart. So these guys were like on that bleeding edge, right? Zappa is known for like his guitar solos that he doesn't know where they're going in the middle of them. And their lyrics were extremely, politically savvy and on edge, and sometimes incomprehensible. So Airplane aren't them. They're not all the way out there. And Zappa was incredibly non-commercial. You won't hear Zappa on the radio, on dad rock radio. Like, you won't hear him anywhere.
Yeah.
Nobody plays Zappa. We do, right?
Yeah,
People who
it's-
like Zappa play Zappa.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's just like you get into it because you're on like I'm going to listen to this, I'm going to listen to this, and I'm going to go further down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with heavy, or for me anyway, with heavier music. Like I would be, all right, I'm going to listen to Metallica. All right, I'm going to listen to Children of Bodom. All right, I'm going to listen to Cannibal Corpse. Like,
And it keeps getting further from the mainstream. Yeah. So Airplane, I would say, was like midway between. They were pushing the scene forward in ways that expanded to their audience's tastes, even though they weren't on the very edge, the most psychedelic. And expand their taste they did, because the Airplane, unlike the Monkees or Zappa, were front and center for some of the most iconic live performances of the era. They performed at the Monterey International Pop Festival along with The Who, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, the Mamas and the Papas, bridging old and new 60s rock, with Mamas and the Papas being the old school and Joplin and The Who and Hendrix being the new psychedelic, more psychedelic sound. And then there was the Woodstock Music and Art Fair in 1969. They flew in by helicopter because the roads were impassable and went on 9 hours late. Can you imagine? Yeah. Slick called it morning maniac music when they finally started playing on Sunday at 6 a.m.
Oh my God.
Shit.
Yeah.
This Woodstock sounds like the worst thing that's ever happened.
It sounds like a combination of the worst and the best.
Yeah, like
Like you wouldn't have wanted to be there because you
No.
would have been very uncomfortable.
I would have been like, this is the worst day of my life.
Where is the bathroom?
Why is everything muddy? I can't drive anywhere.
It's the worst multiple days of your life.
Yeah, I know. I'm trapped here. There's no water.
You can't get out.
It's
Yeah.
something that could only happen in the 60s, because when they tried it in the 90s, it sucked.
Yeah, that couldn't be replicated.
And if you look into like Woodstock 99, it's fucking awful.
Oh, I bet.
Like, not just because Limp Bizkit was there, but Limp Bizkit was there, and that kind of made it.
So much of Woodstock's appeal was the chance to simply come together and touch what we knew had already taken birth. The audience was completely appreciative, no demanding attitudes with the applause, total acceptance when one group stopped and another began. There was no competition. The musical execution of most of the bands was far from perfect, but the spirit was so powerful it overrode all technical considerations.
I mean, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
It does sound like a moving experience, but all the other shit, no way.
It's a little bit weird that people listen to Woodstock. Like there are recordings of it that I think you can listen to on
like-
Spotify or anything. But
Yeah, I think Hendrix is like really well known for like the performance at Woodstock.
the Star Spangled Banner. Yeah.
Oh, never mind. This is probably something I should research one day. I'll do a strange ride on Woodstock. I was about to say, who set this whole thing up? Like, why is it a thing? But
Honestly, that would be a damn good Strange Ride episode.
It's an interesting story. Yeah, I mean, it was created by a music promoter who intended to sell tickets, but the festival was so popular that they just opened it up as a free festival because so many people converged on it at this farm. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
It was very intentionally set. Like, it's outside New York City. It's not in a bad spot.
No.
Like, you're close to a major metropolitan area, but far enough away that you can get 100,000 people into one place. But then it just got so big that they couldn't keep track anymore, and they turned it into a free festival in the middle of the festival. So some people at Woodstock paid. Some people just got in.
Whoa.
Yeah, Savannah would have been really annoyed.
I would have been pissed. I don't like going to normal music festivals.
You would not have made a very good hippie. I want my money back. Savannah's looking for the ticket office.
You're trying to turn
Where's
me
the
into some
ticket
kind of
office?
like Karen or something.
You're the Karen at Woodstock.
I just understand my limits, and I'd rather be home playing Baldur's Gate than being muddy and around a bunch of drunk and drugged out people.
Let me tell you
to
another
be fair,
story.
they didn't have Baldur's Gate.
Yeah,
they didn't.
but
Yeah.
I'll bring it with me when I time travel back to Woodstock.
They flew out the airplane right after their performance to appear on Dick Cavett's interview show. This is a fascinating video that I've watched more than once because I still struggle to wrap my head around what I'm seeing. Dick Cavett was a late night host who interviewed like all the major celebrities, but also like intellectual figures of the time period. We almost don't have a correlation anymore because Jimmy Fallon can't hold an intellectual conversation with anybody under any circumstances.
Speaking of puppets.
You're right. Yeah. Right? Thank you, Mims. I need that. That really warms my cold little heart. But it used to be the case that late night TV, where these, heavy hitting like Norman Mailer and stuff would come on and talk about journalism and life and politics. So anyway, Dick Cavett does this episode where he brings the Woodstock generation they're not called the Woodstock generation, but the hippie scene onto his show. And you can still watch this on YouTube. I highly recommend that you just give it 10 minutes of your life. That it's fascinating. Cavett, who usually sat with his guests in armchairs facing each other, like a serious conversation, sat with the Woodstock generation in a circle on the floor. Teenagers and 20-somethings surrounded Cavett and the musicians on all sides, and the floor was painted in psychedelic swirls to suggest
that's really like not talking down, like meeting at their own level.
In theory, I have some. So it feels that way. So Joni Mitchell hadn't appeared at Woodstock, although Joni Mitchell is famous for having written the song Woodstock, which you probably are more familiar with the CSNY version of. But anyway, she wasn't actually at Woodstock, even though she wrote Woodstock.
She was like me.
She's
like, fuck that shit.
No, the reason she didn't go is because she had been scheduled to appear on the Cavett show, and she was afraid she would miss it.
Oh.
She wanted to make sure she got on the TV show because it was a huge part of American culture, and she was Canadian. She was there, as were Stephen Stills and David Crosby, who had been at Woodstock performing with Graham Nash. Jimi Hendrix didn't make it because the festival had run so late that his performance had only just finished. He also may have been sleeping off some of what he'd taken at the festival. What makes the interview so strange is that Cavett talks to these musicians like he's trying to be hip with what the kids are into.
Oh, no!
Like
you do follow kids.
Yeah. But here's the other weird thing. Cavett is only 3 years older than Grace Slick.
Okay.
Even though she's one of the kids and he's one of the adults. Uh-huh. He is the adult.
Yeah.
And he's only 5 years older than Kantner and David Crosby. So they almost could have gone to high school together. He could have gone to high school with Grace Slick. Almost could have gone to high school with Kantner and Crosby. Cavett is fairly square interviewing these hippie musicians. He distances himself from the anti-war politics of the counterculture by making references to his time serving in Guadalcanal. And when he asks them about their politics, they tell him they have little or no faith in politicians. So you have to remember, Cavett's audience is middle-brow Americans, like a regular-ass 1950s mom and dad, and he's sitting around with these kids who threaten them. So he is definitely making moves to show that audience that he's not with them, even though he's also making moves, as Mims is saying, to show that he is with them.
So he's trying to ride the middle of two extremes,
yes.
which is always a shit situation.
It's a fascinating thing to behold, and it's a little cringy sometimes. Cavett seems to know his role to introduce middle America to the freaks and weirdos who had somehow grabbed the culture by the crotch. He spends the interview cracking corny jokes. He asks if the musicians genuinely believe in astrology and what their parents think of what they're doing. He good-naturedly needles Slick about having gone to Finch and asks what her parents do for a living. He's basically trying to show that she's
she was
upper class and that she's not really a hippie. For her part, she spends the interview calling Dick Cavett Jim.
What?
I love this woman. Yeah, Dick Cavett at one point tries to give it back to her, and he says, "Oh, all right, Janice," because she's not Janis Joplin. Anyway, the Airplane also performed at the low point of the late 60s. Do you know what the low point was, Mims? The Altamont Speedway. Yeah, it's the Altamont Speedway. It's the anti-Woodstock, known as the Altamont Free Concert. This was a Rolling Stones invention. Mick Jagger was sad that he wasn't at Woodstock. So he wanted to make up his own version of Woodstock at San Francisco's Golden Gate Park with the Airplane and the Dead. But the city wouldn't give them a permit. And so they had to resort to using the Altamont Speedway, which was 40 miles outside of San Francisco. Okay. You know this story? Vaguely. The Hells Angels provided security.
Oh, yeah.
Which they had done at other events. But this time, as many participants say about this event, the vibes were all wrong. Well, enjoy that for a moment because it's going to go real bad. Yeah.
Oh, the vibes are
the
like
vibes,
rancid.
yes. In the 60s, if the vibes are wrong, you better, Annie, get your gun. So the Angels, who had been paid in beer, were running out of beer. And they were more than a little drunk or high or whatever the Angels generally were. During the Airplane set, one of the Angels started beating someone up in the middle of the crowd.
Whoa.
In an act of remarkable bravery, Marty Balin leapt off the stage and told the biker to get off the spectator. When the biker wouldn't comply, Balin said, "Fuck you," and the biker knocked him to the ground. The biker later apologized. The situation was so bad that the Dead showed up, but turned around and left before playing a single note, citing the violent atmosphere. The vibes are bad.
Yeah.
I think vibes are off is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah. So the Dead walk in and then they walk backwards back out of it. Yeah. Jerry Garcia's like, "No, thank you."
Yeah.
Later that night, during the Stones set, a young black man named Meredith Hunter was stabbed by the Angels and rushed to the hospital, where he died.
Oh my God.
It was a dark, dark night for rock and roll.
Holy shit.
Altamont showed the limits of the idealism underneath the hippie movement, and by extension, the Airplanes' music. An important component of the countercultural music of the 60s was the belief that these musicians could cool the aggressions of Western life, which had resulted in the Vietnam War. Art could fix our violent tendencies, and that they could create a new paradigm for a more peaceful and interconnected way of living. But at the Altamont Speedway, the music had been the cause for the gathering, but had done nothing to quell the underlying hostilities within the crowd, or more specifically, the bikers serving as the event's security.
And that's what I was just thinking is I agree with that sentiment to a point, but the thing is that the people who need to see that art the most are not going to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
So why did this whole thing went crazy because of the bikers?
Probably. That was the mistake, although they had done security at other events. So
The problem is, when you're paying people in beer, you need to pay the right people in beer.
Yeah. Well, also that too. That's another mistake.
it's a very 60s thing to do.
I've gotten, as a musician, I've gotten paid in beer.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah.
And
but not your security.
no.
You know what I mean? Security should be the sober people there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got that Burning Man aesthetic, right? The Burning Man has always been the closest I think our culture has come to trying to replicate this. The idea that it's all about barter and that we don't need the system, we don't need police, we can do it all ourselves. But the Hells Angels and the hippies, while they had a lot in common being outsiders and countercultural, they also had a lot of differences.
Yeah.
And the Rolling Stones, there was just different images. Maybe the Rolling Stones were supposed to be harder, bad boy kind of thing, but the Grateful Dead and the Airplane really weren't that. They were the counterculture. They were the rebels, but not that kind of rebel.
It's different. Just because there's an umbrella doesn't mean that you're getting rained on the same way.
Yeah. So in my opinion, Altamont was by no means the end of the dream, but it did put a significant damper on the enthusiasm wrought at Woodstock. And there is where I'm going to leave it for the first half of our conversation about how we built this city. I know we are far from the 80s. We have only just barely peaked into 1970, but that was the heyday of the Jefferson Airplane, and we really can't understand this song unless we have a full grasp of who the Airplane were. You guys feel like you got the Airplane now?
I think so.
Yeah. So when we come back, we will talk about how the airplane broke up, which of course they inevitably will do, and how they reformed as Jefferson Starship, and then how the Jefferson Starship became the Starship, and then how the Starship recorded their number one song.
And the worst song ever written.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Here on Strange Ride.
Thank you for riding along with us. Please watch your step as you exit and remember to take all personal belongings with you.